Today we're unpacking a pretty stunning analysis from Professor Jiang Xueqin about the US-Iran war. He's the guy who actually predicted this war would start in the first place, and now he's using that same framework to predict how it's all going to end. So let's dive right in and see how he connects the dots.
I want you to just think back to May of 2024 for a second. At a time when most people thought otherwise, Professor Jiang laid out these three, frankly, shocking predictions. This wasn't some wild guess, though. It was the output of a very specific method that we're about to break down.
And here's the thing that gives this whole analysis so much weight. The first two predictions already happened. Just like he said, Trump won and the war with Iran began. So that leaves that third, massive prediction just hanging in the air. Which, of course, brings us to the big question we're tackling today.
So how on earth did he see this coming? I mean, was it a crystal ball? Some kind of magic? Nope. It was a repeatable method, a framework for looking at the deep currents of history. Let's quickly look at how we got to this point.
The timeline here is just remarkable, right? He made the callback in May 2024, and then we all watched it play out, first in November, then in early 2025. And that brings us right here, to today, with basically the entire world holding its breath, waiting to see if that third domino is going to fall. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this thing, the framework itself. The professor calls it predictive history, and it's really built on three core pillars. You could think of this as the engine that drives every single one of his conclusions.
So, the framework has three parts. First, you have structure. These are the big, unchangeable facts on the ground: geography, economics, things that aren't going anywhere. Second, you have incentives. This is all about using game theory to cut through the noise and figure out what each side really wants. And third, history, recognizing that empires and nations tend to repeat the same patterns over and over. To really get this war, you got to use all three. So let's start with incentives.
So what does each player actually want? I mean, really. According to this framework, you have to toss out the official press releases and the speeches and dig down to the core non-negotiable interests that are driving their decisions. And this is where it gets really interesting. Officially, what does the US say it wants? You know the drill. Peace, democracy, stopping Iran from getting a nuke. But this analysis argues that the real goal, the one that truly matters, is about controlling Middle Eastern oil to protect the petrodollar system. That's the whole deal, where oil is priced in dollars, and it's basically the foundation of America's financial power. Now let's flip the script and look at Iran. Their motivations are layered, for sure. But number one, with a bullet, is just national survival. They've seen what happened to Iraq and Libya, and they are not going to let that happen to them. After that, yeah, they want recognition and end to sanctions and to protect their influence in the region. And of course, there are other players on the board. The framework suggests Israel is kind of auditioning to become the new sheriff in town, the next dominant regional power. And the Gulf states, well, they're playing a much simpler game: survival. They're just trying to figure out who's going to win so they can align with them.
Okay, so we've got what everyone wants. But what you want and what you can actually get are often two very different things. And that's where these structural realities come in, the hard, non-negotiable facts that limit everyone's options.
And the first big one is absolutely crucial. While the US completely owns the skies, history has shown us time and time again, you can't win a war like this from 30,000 feet. If you want total victory, if you want regime change, you need boots on the ground. In Iran, they've spent the last 25 years preparing for that exact scenario. Now let's talk about the economics of this conflict, because this is where the asymmetry becomes just glaring. Iran's primary offensive weapon, one of its drones, costs about $50,000. Keep that number in your head.
Now compare that to what it cost the US to shoot one of them down with a single high-end interceptor missile, up to $10 million. That is a 200-to-1 cost disadvantage. It's just not sustainable. You're basically in a race to win the war before you go broke.
And the economic pressure isn't just military spending. This war is disrupting two of the planet's most critical arteries for trade, the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. Together, that's more than a third of all global trade, and that sends massive shockwaves through the entire world economy.
And all of this, the financial costs, the economic disruption, it all creates immense political pressure back home. Public support for the war is already underwater, and as the costs go up, that number is only going to go down. Iran's entire strategy is built around exploiting this exact vulnerability.
So you put all of this together, the real interests of the players, the hard realities on the ground,
and the analysis suggests the entire outcome of this war now hangs on a single, massive decision. It's a fork in the road. And this is it. This is the question that changes everything. Does America double down and escalate to a full-scale ground invasion, or does it stick to an air war? The answer to that one question leads to two completely different futures.
If the answer is no, no ground troops, you get scenario 1, a managed retreat. America will eventually declare some kind of symbolic victory and pull out, weakened for sure, but not broken. But if they do send in ground troops, the analysis predicts an empire-ending catastrophe. A quagmire so bad it would require a national draft, something the country simply cannot sustain.
And this brings us right to the end game, the final predictions. Based on this entire framework and those two potential scenarios, here is how Professor Jiang predicts this is all going to conclude.
Prediction number 1, there will be no full-scale ground invasion. The argument is that, despite any tough talk, the risks are just too astronomically high. The military and political advisors will make it clear that a ground war means a draft, years of fighting, and is basically political suicide. So, prediction number 2, America is going to find an exit ramp. As the economic and political pain gets worse and worse, the U.S. is going to look for a way out. Just like in Vietnam, the president will likely declare some kind of face-saving victory to justify bringing everyone home, probably within the next 12 to 24 months.
And that leads to the third, and honestly, the most world-changing prediction: a complete reorganization of the Middle East. With America gone, a massive power vacuum opens up, and it'll be filled by the two powers left standing, Iran and Israel. They'll likely settle into a tense coexistence, and the Gulf states will have to pick a side. And maybe most importantly of all, this American retreat will deal a mortal wound to the petrodollar system.
In the end, the professor leaves us with this powerful and pretty chilling historical parallel. Like ancient Athens, which wasn't destroyed by a foreign enemy, but by its own imperial overreach, its own hubris, America may have just walked into a trap of its own making. And the scariest part of this analysis is the idea that the question is no longer whether America will lose, but how it chooses to manage that loss, and what kind of world will be left in its wake.